Like I always get a little nervous when I walk into a kind of men's group and everybody's the same.
The most simple thing, honestly, I say is find two other men and decide we're going to start meeting at this day and at this time because we want this.
And for me, what I found being a therapist, I really struggled to just show up as a guy.
To some extent, a group can only go as deep as its least committed member.
Are you trying to find a group of guys you can have real conversations with? Are you considering joining or maybe even founding a men's group of your own? If you're looking for the answers to those questions, you're in the right place. My name's Tim Winnicky. This is American Masculinity. And in our 15th episode, we're bringing on Jason Lange. Jason's got over a decade of experience in the men's group space, and now he helps men build them. We're really lucky to have his perspective on this show. I found his wisdom practical and useful. I'm sure you will too. While you listen to the conversation, do me a favor and think about the kinds of men you would want to see in a men's group you wanted to join. We'll talk about it a little bit more at the end. I'll see you there. Let's get started. Hey, Jason, thanks so much for coming on, man.
So excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Tim.
I mean, like we were talking about a little earlier, it's just been really kind at how many people in the helping space have been willing to help us get this started. And so I just really want to publicly say thank you so much for coming on and helping us do this, man. It means a lot.
Yeah. I'm deeply aligned with the mission. So excited to be here with you.
I've looked a little bit at your work, but can you tell our listeners why you're qualified to tell people how to get men's groups going?
Yeah. My journey into becoming a men's group facilitator, proponent, cheerleader really started with my own journey. I got exposed pretty luckily, I would say, to my first men's group in my mid-20s back in the mid-2000s. And, back then they were around, but not nearly the cultural presence, men's work has now. So back then you said men's group, and most people would think of a church group or maybe an AA group, both of which have incredible value, but are a little different than what, I'm kind of leading and what's emerging now. So I got into my first group in my 20s, and it was the first time I was really exposed to deep masculine presence, connection, support, and yes, accountability, and kind of, in some good ways got called forward in myself in a time when I was feeling pretty lost and just really couldn't quite find my footing. I found a crew of men some of whom were older than me, wiser than me, some of whom were peers, that really helped me solidify and start to root myself and take some of the first bold actions I had in my life. I was raised, I'm a white guy, if you can't see me, raised lower middle class in the Midwest of the US and had most of my basic security needs totally met and a lot of privilege in a sense. But my family had zero skill or sense of interiority. There was no emotional capacity, attunement, connection, and very little physical, as I later discovered as I got deeper into my journey. And so when I launched out into the world, I was this deeply anxious, very kind of numb, frozen guy for a large chunk of my life. And it was really the consistency of men's work and men's group in particular that started to thaw me out and help me feel more comfortable in myself. And then I was so into it, right? I was just so into group. I was talking about it all the time. Eventually, my first group, partly because of the power of a men's group, helped me get aligned to the passion I wanted to pursue at the time, which was filmmaking and the arts. And it was because of that I moved my whole life out to Los Angeles and dove into a career doing that and focused on that, for about 2 or 3 years and let go of men's group, and quickly was brought very close to the reality. Wow, I don't do well outside of a container like that, left to my own devices. I need men like that. I got super overweight. I was addicted to porn. I was totally stressed out financially, and I just wasn't thriving. And it became pretty clear, like, okay, I need a group to help me get my stuff back together. So me and 2 guys in LA that I had been in touch with started one out there. One of the men in that was a therapist. So we met in his office, and, guys, I would talk about it so much. Guys would ask me, can I come? And I'd be like, no, we're full. Like, we literally can't fit any more men in the room. So that led me to just start leading groups out of my living room in the middle of Los Angeles. I just post them on Meetup, and I got such positive response from that. I was like, okay, this feels good. And unlike other things I was doing for finances at the time, every time I did it, I felt better. Like I felt more energized, and I was like, oh, if there's a way to make a living doing this, I want to do it because it's changed my life. And now I want to bring this to other men. And so I went out and got a bunch of training over a couple years as an authentic relating facilitator, doing men's work with John Wineland, studying under a psychotherapist who teaches a kind of non-therapy shadow work for men, and just fallen in love. So now men's work's kind of the bigger umbrella I work under, but my mission is every man should be in a men's group, which I think is one of the missing pieces for particularly Western American men right now, that complements, it does not replace, but it complements therapy, coaching, etc.
Yeah, I think there's a very different thing that you get being in some kind of community. A friend of mine we were talking about the distinction between community, friendship, and clinical work. And the nice thing with community is you don't have to like everybody there. In fact, it's usually really useful to have somebody you don't like there to learn from. And I think that as an individual coach or counselor, there's only so much perspective people get reflected from you based on what they see. And so looking at a group of hopefully a little bit different guys, right? I always get a little nervous when I walk into a kind of men's group and everybody's the same, just because there's less opportunities. I struggled a little bit too when I lost some of my groups, right? Coming out of the military, you have people around you, you have accountability around you, and that transition into just a free-floating solo life, it's tricky, and not everybody makes the turn. It took me probably 6 months to kind of get my legs under me at all, just to find some, people I trusted around me for that accountability.
100%. I think it's so important for us guys. And I mean, part of my argument is we thrive when we have our band of brothers, so to speak, when we go deep with a certain group of guys. And may know the science of this behind this more, but a guy in one of the communities I'm in was talking about difference between male and female bodies, of which there are some, right? We both have masculine and feminine, but there are some differences. And one was around the wiring, the receptors for oxytocin and vasopressin. And male bodies tend to have more receptors for vasopressin, which is a similar bonding hormone, but it's different. What causes that bonding? Going through hard shit together, surviving hard things, problem solving, facing challenge. And I think without that, a lot of the men who show up to me are kind of depressed and alone and isolated. I think the military is a great place where people see that so clearly. Like the level of bonding, clients I've worked with that have been in the come back, it's like, the stuff you go through together, like you're in it for life. You might not see them for a long time, but there's a deep bond. And I've found men's groups can be a version of that. Obviously, it's not the same thing. And kind of in some sense, instead of facing external challenges a lot, what we're learning to do is face the inner challenges inside of us, but with support around us. And it's profound, right? The level of belonging and purpose is what I often tell guys you can get from being part of a really powerful peer group.
Well, and like one of the first questions I had down to talk about, I don't even know how to ask because we've been kind of getting into it already, which is great. I think the other thing, I always like to think of therapy as kind of a training wheels relationship, right? You're in front of somebody who cares about you. You have an implicit reason to trust them. They've got a license. They've got confidentiality. And ideally, you take kind of that feeling of connection out into your world. And I think we've lost so much practice in community that men's groups fill that gap from a social lens. You're so much better off trying to go connect just out in the world, out at work, whatever you're doing, after you've had some safety to work out the kinks and to go through that awkward phase of how do I be in a group of people after the pandemic or after growing up with just in front of a screen or right?
How I often put that is, right, this is where I think they're so complementary. They're not replacements for each other, but they can be incredible cross-training, right? Like sometimes you need to sprint, sometimes you need to weight lifts. The beauty of like a therapeutic relationship, the way I kind of often put it is it's about the container is literally that the direction of attunement is one way, right? Unfortunately, the truth is I've heard from people, it's like, if your therapist is coming in and you're having to regulate them, something's not going right in that relationship. Ideally, 100%. What you're rewiring there is that pattern of what loving presence put on you is like, which, goes right to so much of our attachment wounding often as kids. And that's a place where we can mend that. and have this safe, clear container for, no, the whole point here is I don't have to caretake you. It's I'm allowed to receive and to come up against my limits in some sense of what it's like to be in presence. And you're right, in a peer men's group, it's different because it's not about that. It's about exchanging that. Sometimes I'm holding space for you. Sometimes you're holding space for me. And there's more of a variety, you're right, of beliefs and histories and structures. And, I recorded a thing recently on how to kind of a little clickbaity, but how to AI proof yourself as a man. And one of the main things I talked about was what you nailed, our capacity to stay in connection, even during conflict and difference, right? So friction, can I stay connected when there's friction? Because if there's one skill, right, that seems to be atrophying pretty fast in our culture, it's that. We get online, we get into our camps. Anyone who's a little different is the total enemy. And what I love about men's groups and particularly some of the shadow ones I lead is paradoxically when we start from, I don't even know who you are and what's going on in your life, what you do for a living, any of that, but we go right to your deepest pain in a sense. And we connect there first. All the other stuff matters so much less. It's like, oh, wow. Then I find out you have a completely different worldview than me. That's so fascinating. But we're already so bonded because we connected as humans first. And I think there's something really potent and powerful to that. And like you said, a skill building place of a different kind than the therapeutic relationship where we do get to get triggered by other guys. We get to get annoyed by other guys. They get to get annoyed by us. And we get to share that with each other. Hey, here's what it's like to actually be with you right now. That is crazy powerful feedback if we've never experienced it before, coming from someone who cares about us and isn't sharing it to shame us, but because they want to be closer to us.
You were talking about the difference in the chemicals earlier. And I think one of the things that men's group orchestrate really well is internal work as work, right? Like people are showing up not... I imagine a women's group looks a lot different. I'm sure there's still structure to it and things like that, but there's a different kind of socialization that women tend to show up with already that we're lacking. And the old adage of men bond side to side, women bond face to face always makes a lot of sense, right? Like you're a lot more likely to be kind of kind and listen to a guy's perspective when you've seen him do something hard with you, even if it's just like working a soup kitchen, right? It doesn't take much.
So true.
You mentioned shadow work a few times. Just so the listeners can get an idea of what that is, can you give me like the 1 to 2 minute summation?
Yeah, I mean, shadow work is such a esoteric, big concept in some sense. There's the Jungian shadow work, and there's more specific variations, obviously. But I mean, at its most general, it's bringing to consciousness that which is unconscious inside of us. So what are the patterns and behaviors? Kind of, in some sense, what's our operating system? Like the rules we're trying to make the world work by that oftentimes we're not even aware of, that usually have some kind of roots in some kind of adverse experience we processed or failed to process earlier in life because we didn't have the safety, support, or tools to do it. So, shadow work is really just oftentimes guys, when they come to my shadow programs, it's one of the big things is there's this thing I keep doing. I don't want to be doing it, and yet I keep doing it. Like, what is going on with that? A way I show up in my relationship or in my finances or addictions or certain things like that. And so shadow work's really the process of just bringing that to the light. Okay, like what is it in my body mind? Usually something I'm trying to protect myself from. So I've created this whole sophisticated, machinery to avoid that I can then, once I become aware of it, I have so much more choice, right? It's like, it's the fish becoming aware of the water they're swimming in, right? So most of their life, they're just like, what do you mean water? Yep. And then you take them out of the water, like, oh my God, it's the Matrix moment, right?
Well, that's what's fun about the depth work. Like no matter the frame, it's people get their why. And once you have your why, it makes it a lot easier to play around with the what.
People often ask me, so like, what is a men's group? What do you do in a men's group? And my answer is usually, well, that's kind of like asking hey, do you meditate? And then you're like, well, what kind of meditation? There is an infinite variety in some sense. And men's groups can be the same, right? There's accountability groups, there's social groups, there's community-oriented groups, there's addiction and recovery groups, there's professional groups, there's practice groups, which are about embodiment and just practice. And then there's, things like shadow work groups. And then there's groups that I kind of like, which blend a little bit of all of them. And I'm part of multiple groups, right? Because some of them serve me in different ways. To me, that's been a great joy. It's like my main source of community now is the different men's groups I'm in.
I love the variation that we have, because I think that opens the door up to more and more men starting them. I think there's like most guys, when you talk to them about this, they think of it as like a therapy group where somebody's going to show up and make everybody cry. And that's not most group. Like, yeah, there's catharsis in a lot of them. And it is nice to have a space where men can like show some tears, but that's not what it has to be. So leaving, like, you really prefer and do the depth work, but what makes men's groups actually work across the board? Like, what is kind of a key feature that makes that work for folks?
I would say, two things immediately come to mind: shared context and commitment. Mm-hmm. And so what I mean by shared context is at least some sense of our why. Why are we here? And a little bit of what are we wanting to get out of this time with each other? If you don't set that early on, it's pretty easy for men in community to gravitate to talking about things, just in their head, talking about concepts and ideas and politics and things, which, that's a version of a men's group. That's not necessarily the version I lead, which is about getting more present and deep and connected and going under the hood, so to speak. But you need to kind of have that shared reality around that. And then commitment is the other big thing I find, that to some extent, a group can only go as deep as its least committed member. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, I've been through the developmental journey of starting groups myself. I help men do that now. Sometimes if we don't set a tight container, because we're like, oh no, I like so-and-so and I do want them to be able to come when they can, it starts to create a leaky energy. Mm-hmm. Where, well, I don't know, they make it when they can. Well, maybe I can't make it this week either. And then it gets fragile in some sense. Mm-hmm. And there's a different energy to it, right? Of, well, this isn't really anyone's priority. It's nice when we can do it. But, contrast that to, the group I left when I moved away from here that I'm now back in after 14 years, which is pretty wild. They've been meeting the whole time. These guys they're to the grave. We're going to watch each other die. And we're here twice a month unless there's an emergency. Like, this is a sacrament in your life. This is a commitment. You reorient your life around being here. And it means that space is pretty heightened when we're in it. It's deep. The men that are there really want to be there. And that has an impact, right, on the feeling of being in the group. So those are two things I often, I actually just support guys in creating. Like, you want to get really clear about why and what you're creating so you can magnetize. It doesn't mean your group's right and another group's wrong, but you want to attract the right people who are yes to that, so then they can be all in with that commitment. And there can be that feeling of I value being here, and I want you to value it just as much, because that creates an energy. It creates a type of commitment that is in and of itself, I have found quite meaningful in my life.
It's so validating to hear you talk about the need for mission and commitment. So I was looking around town and there wasn't any get together for male clinicians, right?
Wow.
And there's only 1 in 5 of us are men in the field. And so it is a unique experience, right? That, like, sometimes it's just nice to have other guys that get the weird job. And when I made the time flexible, attendance was like 1 or 2 guys would show up, and it wasn't generally the same guys. And the minute I'm like, okay, this Friday of the month at this time, all of a sudden we're getting this, like, same guys start showing up. That consistently really starts to level off. And I think having that mission, or that, like, here's what the group is for, helps so many guys, because all of a sudden, like, the ones that are showing up are on board for whatever that is.
Exactly.
And like we were talking about earlier, that social friction is so important for growth, that if there isn't a shared mission to make that friction worth it, you're not going to go back. You're just going to, like, write off 100%. Somebody in the group and want to leave. There's a really broad range of, like, men's groups that are out there as far as their impact, their establishment. Like we were talking earlier, we got Mark Azulay out here, who's a great guy, runs fantastic groups, and his groups aren't cheap. right? Like you gotta be a little well off to get into those groups. For the guys that don't have the resources to pay to join something that's already established, that's ran by some kind of professional, how do you recommend they start building one up themselves?
Yeah, there's a whole range here, and I'll just out myself first. I'm going to name something I built for this very reason, but it's not the only mechanism for this. It's just I actually started getting asked this a lot by men. You know, there is one great book by the guys who started Mankind Project back in the day, A Circle of Men. It's like $20 online, and it'll give you a great structure, if nothing else, to start with. The most simple thing, honestly, I say is find 2 other men and decide we're going to start meeting at this day and at this time because we want this. That's how I started my group in LA. I found 2 other guys who were committed, and kind of like you said, our commitment to that time started to create a wake that some other guys came in on. And it doesn't have to be super complicated. You know, there's all kinds of formal things I can teach about men's groups and connection and how you weave together a group. And, you know, there's real skills and capacities there. But at its most simple, it's actually breaking the men side by side thing and saying, hey, let's turn our attention onto each other. Rather than triangulating, I'm going to put my attention on you. You're going to put my attention on me. What's going on in your life? Where are you in pain? Where are you struggling? Where do you need help? What are you wanting? What's in the way of that? Right? Just simple questions like that are often, you know, I get a lot of guys who do my program and then they go out, you know, for a beer with a buddy and they end up having the type of conversation they've never had before. And they're like, I've known this guy for 20 years and we went deeper in one night than we had that whole 20 years once you learn where to place your attention, in a sense. So that simple, like literally just grab a couple guys and say, let's talk about life. That is revolutionary for a lot of men, I would say. Then the other thing I'll kind of point to is, you know, there's more and more groups being offered right now, which is great. Online, in person, meetup.com, Eventbrite, stuff like you and Mark are hosting, like it's taken off, which is extremely encouraging. I can share that even though I lead groups, so I lead programs that take men through the experience, and my deepest passion is actually helping men start their own groups because, and this is based on just my experience and now what I've helped other men do, the level of ownership when it's not someone else's group, there's no leader. We are here because we are committed to each other in depth, is a rare and precious thing. So I call these peer or decentralized men's groups, right? Where we can get tools. And, you know, my first group, even the one I keep talking about, for a year we had a leader. And then he kind of gave us the keys once we learned what to do. But then it became, you know, ours. And so I'm super passionate about if you cannot find a group that you can afford or works for your schedule or whatever in your community or locale, this is the challenge I say to guys, then I think it's your responsibility to start it. Because if you can't find it, there's another guy out there in your situation who can't as well. And one of the biggest acts of leadership you can do is planting that flag like you did. Hey, here's this thing. I kind of would like some community around being a clinician as a man. There's nothing. There are a lot of ways you could have gone with that. You took the bold one and said, okay, well, maybe I'm going to start something here and create the community I'm kind of longing for. So I'm really passionate about it. And I've started I did launch something this year I call Men's Group Experience, which is for guys who just want to get a hit of what a 12-week men's group is like. It's, I give the whole structure. It's 6 guys that meet online every week for 12 weeks. And then have experienced it. And whether you then want to continue with that group or you now have a framework in your bones that you can then bring to your local community, your church, your buddies, your work, coworkers, whatever that might be. And then I have another thing around that's an actual training, like a profession, kind of okay, here's everything I've ever learned about facilitating groups and what it takes to make one run. For here, that's not free, but it's, reasonable, especially if you get it as a group. And there are definitely just free resources out there. I can tell you, Owen Marcus, who co-founded Everyman, has now launched his own, the Meld community. His whole framework's free online as well. So if you're hungry for it, you can find it. What I found in my journey, and which is, I think, the nice way to do the dance if possible, is have the experience, and then it's much easier to lead people through it.
Yeah.
right? So sit in circle for a while, have some experience. Doesn't mean that you have to like do it for 10 years, but sit in some circles, get the framework, get the feeling of what kind of depth is possible, and then start one. Like, I'll be first to cheerlead you if you do. It's one of the things that I really think would be talk about American masculinity, is a huge gap in our culture where we can really move the needle pretty fast.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. So the whole reason I got the idea is Mark had done years ago. He had done the similar kind of group, but only ran it for a year just because he was like, all right, I ran it. Who's taking it up? And no one picked it up. Right.
Yeah.
Which is kind of normal for those things, right? Sometimes people aren't going to step up. But then I went out and tried to do general men's groups. And for me, what I found being a therapist, I really struggled to just show up as a guy. Like the minute people started talking about death stuff, I like all of my therapy instincts were kicking in and disrupting, right? That is not the environment for that. And no one's asking me for that. Like I joke a lot with my students where I'm like, your behaviors that you exhibit in a therapy session are garbage behaviors with your loved ones.
That's funny.
Like you can't have that emotional distance to do the work with somebody you're really emotional with. And so that really made it easier when it was my turn to start leading something. That little bit of experience with Mark, this experience of running through a few men's groups, getting a feeling for what that room feels like and what to do with it was profoundly helpful. So even if you want to be the guy that runs it, I think Jason's absolutely right. If you can, just go try a few, even if they're not quite in alignment with what you want, just to get a feel for it.
Yeah.
What's the biggest mistake you see guys make as they kind of jump into trying to build men's groups or joining them?
Yeah, I would honestly say the commitment thing, not having a tight enough container. What I've now seen multiple times is I'm much more of the side, and I think it's more effective to have a smaller group of guys that are all really committed than the bigger net with flaky attendance. And then, another one is, it's kind of an interesting one to say, but it's part of what I'm training my guys on, is being willing to cut each other off. And what I mean by that is to prioritize depth in the group. I tend to work with a lot of so-called nice guys, and it's easy for, just someone keeps talking and, oh my God, the timer went off, but I don't want to be, I don't want to be mean. Clearly he needs this. And that lack of boundaries can really impact a group. Yeah. So being willing to actually interrupt someone, but for the sake of depth, I think is the key thing here, is a real capacity that I've realized I've had to train my groups in of, it's not that I want you to stop. It's just you've been going for like 5 minutes and I'm not even sure what you're wanting or wanting to talk about. And I really want to get clear so we can serve you or support you, or, whatever it might be, is a real capacity. And also not weaving in from the beginning. I learned this in one of the programs I created where our first 2 cohorts, we hadn't done this. And then now we've learned our lesson, weaving into the fabric of the group clearings early on, so that if there's anything men need to clear, you actually start meetings with it.
What do you mean clearing?
So clearings would be anytime right, we've been talking about friction. If you and I have some kind of friction, you said something that hurt my feelings, or I feel mad at you because you told me you'd call me offline and you didn't, whatever, just anything that is energetically in between the two of us being open and present and being fully in the group together is something that needs to be cleared, right? So rather than avoiding it, we actually create a conscious space to go into the conflict and get clear about what happened, what we're each feeling about it. Is there anything we need to do to restore integrity and harmony and trust, etc.? Again, because what'll happen if, I've had this in my groups and some I launched, and we learned the lesson, if you don't, that stuff starts to accumulate, guys aren't fully in, or one man's avoiding someone, and it changes the whole energy of the group pretty fast, and they'll break apart.
Yeah, the vibe just gets right.
Not everyone's fully participating in a sense. So it's consciously building this skill and capacity that actually will deepen our trust with each other if we clear this stuff. And if for so many men, it is so tremendously healing to start to have relationships where, oh, I don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be perfect. I step on your toes sometimes, you step on my toes sometimes. But wow, what I now trust is we have a mechanism to restore and to repair those ruptures together. And building that capacity in a group, another thing you were talking about early, lo and behold, makes it a lot easier to do it out in life, really profoundly. So, being willing to interrupt each other for the sake of depth, being willing to create clearings for each other, having strong commitments, I think are all things that are really, really powerful in addition to, that shared context we kind of talked about earlier.
So consistency, shared mission, and a structure around accountability from the very start.
Yes. Yeah,
And
agreements are a huge part.
Just very broad when we talk about accountability, right? To include not just you're making it here, but that you're showing up here in the way that you mean to, and that we can have accountability with each other over whatever rubs.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a process and a commitment to not holding that in resentment or silence, but to actually bringing it forward. And this is another one I've had to learn some lessons around, because it's such a kind of a masculine idea of, anytime I have a beef with you, I'm going to bring it to you first. I would never bring it to the group. The challenge I've actually found with that is you and I can be processing our beef offline, but both be totally in our shadows and reactivity. And the opportunity at actually bringing it forward in a group is the group can see both of where we might not be owning our stuff and actually point out kind of as that objective third, in a sense of, hey, wow, yeah, you've actually got a part to this too. Can you see that? You're telling him it's all about him, but we see this too. And that's been a revelation, and it's a lot more vulnerable.
It is.
To everybody's got my eyes on me. I'm going to bring up my beef with you now. And how do we skillfully navigate that? It's not the only way to do it, but it is a lesson I've learned, because I had some guys try to clear things offline, and they actually made it worse with each other because they just got further entrenched because they couldn't see, in some sense, part of what the other person was trying to illuminate for them.
Yeah, I think it can often click over into that status negotiation that men often fall into. And I think that's a natural negotiation that we fall into. This is not like me stigmatizing that. But I think you're exactly right when you say the group is a container that you get to practice this in. And without the group, when you aren't very skilled in it, or one of you isn't very skilled in it, it's a lot easier to make those big mistakes. I often say guys need guardrails. We need people around us that when we start to get off course, they give us a little nudge, right? Or sometimes a big nudge, depending. And it's interesting, whenever I go train clinicians on working with men, I talk about accountability for attendance. If a patient of mine misses twice in a row and it's not a medical emergency, we're having a conversation about whether they're continuing. And if it happens again, they're gone. If they're consistently not doing the homework we talk about in the session, okay, man, I'm not wasting your time or your money. You're not ready to do this stuff. Maybe I'm not the approach for you. Let's find somebody who is, but it's not me. And the amount of times that clinicians look at me with these big eyes of hey, this is what about therapy is about that perfect acceptance. These groups are about this perfect acceptance. You can be perfectly accepting of someone and acknowledge that this isn't the space for you then.
Exactly.
And that doesn't need to be aggressive. It doesn't need to be unkind, but it's important, and it's particularly important for guys.
Yeah, it's a big, learning I've had to make as a coach. I'm coming at things from a different angle, but there is a truth to, I've had to build the confidence in some sense to tell guys, hey, I actually don't think this is the right medicine for you, right? My group or my program or my offering. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just pretty clear to me that this isn't the most conducive environment to what you need right now. And then it's supporting them and, hopefully finding something else that does, because either they're not showing up in the ways they need to actually get the work out of it, or it's just not the right fit, right? We're not providing the right medicine for their stage of their healing journey. And that's an important thing. And it was a standard I had a hard time holding earlier, because I was coming from scarcity and, oh my God, I got to work with anyone. And then it didn't feel good to me, and it didn't feel good to the men when it became, sometimes it become clear, oh, this isn't actually what you need. Right? This isn't actually going to get you what you're yearning for. And I don't want to be taking your money for that, right? I don't want to be taking your time for that, even more precious than that. So I do think it's important to have those standards and that commitment, because then it also serves the guys who are in, because then they can feel it too, right? They feel your commitment, they feel the commitment of the other men, and it does create that that wake, so to speak, is what I've been using of, okay, there's a current here and I want to be plugged into it and these men are committed to it. And I don't want to be the one who messes that up in some sense. It's like the healthy kind of accountability that is so good for a group. And again, one person kind of being a little leaky around that, or just not having the capacity at this moment in their life to show up in the ways they thought they did. It's okay to honor that and be like, okay, well then let's find out what else might work for you.
Yeah, I think that the trick is when something's not working out like that, one of the kind ways to help people is by helping them find what would work.
Yeah.
And you can't make anybody go to anything, but I think it softens things so much when you're like, hey, this space isn't working for you. Totally. There is space for you somewhere. Like, here are the things that, like, just talking to you, man. These are what you're into. These are some things that might work. I hope you try.
I had such a visceral experience of this in my 20s, actually. The guy who led that first men's group, he was a men's coach, and I started working with him. And we went pretty deep in like 3 months. And there was a point about 3 months in, some old, pretty deep wounding around my childhood started coming up, and I had kind of a big catharsis with him in a session. And at the end of it, he held beautiful presence. And at the end, he's like, hey, I really want to support you and I love you. And this isn't really my thing. What kind of happened there? And I get a sense this is really what you need right now. Just so happened his wife was a somatic therapist, so it was beautiful. He's like, you might want to consider, it doesn't have to be my partner, but she's a somatic therapist. I think that could do something for you right now. And then kind of once you've healed some of that, I think you'll be ready kind of to jump back on what I'm doing. And it was one of the most loving, incredible things. And I trusted him so much after that, where I was like, wow, okay, you're really not in this for just the money, so to speak. Like you want me to get what I want, and you're willing to kind of realize where your gifts lie and where they don't. And that's kind of become a model for me, that I try to hit. And then, the beautiful thing about this kind of networking and growing a community of people in the men's work healing space is then it's like, oh, now I've got a Rolodex. And it's like, okay, you know what? Actually, I actually know someone who'd be perfect, right? Sometimes I'll get guys like with religious trauma from certain places. And it's like, yeah, I know totally who to work with, right? Because this is what they do. This is what they do.
And you're always going to be better off with a specialist if you can get to one.
Yeah, always. Exactly. And then it's like, and then you can always come back, right? But it's like, clearly there's some other medicine right now that I think is going to serve you even more.
Well, I love that you said that he wasn't, like, the reason you knew he wasn't in it for the money is because he knew what was going on there. Where, yeah, I'm helping you, but you need something different. That's a big red flag for me when I'm listening to clients talk about where they're finding community and it's a church or it's a group, and their story is, this is the only way to X, and you're only going to get there through us. And that's not like an immediate like no-go for me, but it is a clear like yellow light. And so also I think be careful with that imposter syndrome when you're going to build a group and kind of over pumping yourself about what the group's going to do.
Totally.
Right? I think that's an easy one to fall into as well. The more we talk about this, I can't help but thinking about my experiences working in the nonprofit world. So for nonprofits, it's always driven by a passionate kind of pillar person or three until they burn out. And most of the time they're recreating the wheel. Like if they took the time and knew where to look, they would have found people doing the kind of work they're trying to do, but they never talked to them. And so I think the other thing that I would recommend if you're starting a group is you don't always need to go to other groups, but you should absolutely talk to any other groups in your area, find out what they've got going on, talk to them about what their process looks like, talk about them about like what is missing that, my group might be a little different and provide something, right? And fill a niche. And I think one thing that also as a group leader, right, it gives you a little bit more of a network of like, hey, I'm leading a group and it's not going well, Phil. Like, what'd you do your third session in when somebody punched somebody or whatever? So we just took a brief break, right? And I was processing and thinking a lot about what we had talked about. And that idea of joining other groups to get ideas was kind of kicking around in my head. And I was reading somewhere, and I can't remember where, that service organizations are starting to make a comeback a little bit. Mm-hmm. And the one I have experience with is the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. The first post for that ever is in Denver. So Denver's pretty awesome for that.
Yeah.
And about 10 years ago, they were dying out, like all the VFWs. It was all a bunch of Vietnam vets that just showed up for like chili, a beer, and a quiet place. But younger vets want service components. Like they're not just going to show up to a bar to hang out in a bar. They want to show up to go do something. And the Post has now been thriving for 10 years because they started incorporating like direct service missions. And like they would have meetings about it and like, hey, you want to join a community? You want to join some guys doing good? Show up for this. I'm wondering, have you seen younger guys successfully join like the elk lodges, all the different, there's dozens of them depending on where you are in the country, right? Have you seen any guys have luck with that in the last 5-10 years?
I haven't personally. I haven't. Most young guys I know are pretty disconnected in that kind of locality. I think there's a desire for it. What, if anything, I have seen is guys get into groups, and then in the trajectory of a group, often there's, okay, we love each other, we're serving each other, and wow, what we've cultivated here is really special. How can what we've cultivated give back? So the group itself goes out and does service stuff together.
I think that's honestly how those elk lodges, how all those places started, right?
Yeah,
It started with a group of guys
totally
getting
believe
together
it.
and then found a mission. And then for whatever reason, we got away from those. And I think now we're trying to build them back up. I think it would be so wonderful if we could get a few of those groups with all their wisdom around that service to really be able to connect with young guys and broaden some of that gap. So if you're listening to this and you have any exposure to that and you have any experience with that, please share it in the comments for us. We want to help some people find this. And Jason and I don't have experience with it, so yours could really help out some folks if you can share it.
100%.
Let's transition into you, man. Like you've got this really powerful story. You've watched, at this point, I'm guessing, hundreds of men kind of transition through themselves through the various groups you've been involved in and led. How has leading all of this shaped your understanding of masculinity, leadership, and community?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, for me, it ended up being a life hack. And what I mean by that is the moment I started leading, it quickly became apparent to be in integrity. I had to take better care of myself, physically, mentally, emotionally, being part of my own groups, my own therapy, my own coaching. It was like, okay, I can't tell guys or create spaces for guys if I'm not doing it myself. And it actually helps me quite a bit knowing, okay, if I'm going to tell some guy to be doing some kind of embodiment practice, I got to be doing one every day. If I'm telling a guy about the value of a men's group, I got to be showing up to my peer group where I'm not leading it. I am sometimes being led and where I'm getting support and services. So it's been great to hold me to the fire in terms of that. And then it's just taught me so much. Like I said, I'm kind of more of a nice, so-called nice guy. I work a lot with Dr. Glover, and to lead a group successfully, I've really had to build my capacity to set healthy boundaries, to interrupt people, to be willing to kind of come in with some strong direction, just in force, but strong direction that can guide men, and to, be willing to bring that discernment online if something's not working in terms of a group or something like that. So I've learned so much about my own leadership in a sense, and probably more than anything else, I've learned that just the thing that often gets guys showing up to me in my groups is when they just hear my story of the groups I'm in and the fact that I'm living it, like this, I don't teach it just because. I teach it because it's what's moved the needle for me. And it really has taught me that I think the new currency of leadership that we're all humans, but men in particular, are being asked to step into is what I call flex flow, which is the recognition of who holds the depth in any particular interaction, and that there is a time for healthy hierarchy. Yes. And what I mean by that is I will sit in my circle here in Colorado with men, and there are areas where I hold the expertise and depth, and I will transmit that, and I will be clear about that. Doesn't mean it's the only way, but there's like a clear, like, hey, I've been through this. Here's what'll work. Here's what I've seen work. Here's where I see you maybe not landing that, so to speak. But that same man, I will be deferring to around other things, certain financial things or relationship things or whatnot. And that discernment and capability to have the flex flow in terms of shared leadership, that we're all growing together, leaning into our strengths, doing our best to shore up our weaknesses, has been a total game changer for me. And why I'm particularly interested in, I think, men's groups and peer groups is I spent a lot of time kind of in the transformational spiritual world. And, at this point, name a community and you're going to find the guru disciple who is fucking their students or stealing their money, or, there's just so many examples of what goes wrong when one person is kind of seen as the guru, the answer to it all. And how, I get it. There's a part of me that yearns to find that person that's like, oh, you know the way it works, and you can, if I just follow you, life will be easy. But a good men's group kind of bursts that in some sense, where it's like, yeah, I know you don't have all the answers. I don't have all the answers. And what I've particularly seen for a lot of men is even guys that had great fathers. No father can give every man all the medicine he needs. Yeah. But what I've seen a group be able to hold is this kind of meta masculine figure, where every man has some piece of the puzzle that is their gift they can bring towards the different facets of masculinity. In a group, Dr. Glover puts it, it's like the Swiss cheese thing, can plug the hole in a way no single person can. And I've experienced that, right? Where some guys give me their body wisdom, some guys it's their spiritual wisdom, some guys it's like their investment wisdom, where I'm like, oh my God, I have no idea where to even start here. And they're like, yeah, here you go. Here's some guidance. And then I'm bringing my own gifts. And that recognition of that, no one person has it all figured out, that lights me up and has totally changed things for me, because now I'm part of a web in a network and it keeps growing. And so if I hit an edge or some place I struggle, I know there's somebody in my network now who has the medicine I need. And that is so relaxing. And I don't expect to get it all from one group or one person, but it's like, okay, this is a lifestyle I'm now part of. And leading groups and seeing that come alive for other men as well, where they're like, the simple thing I talk to so many men about is, I don't have to do everything alone. I can ask for help. Just that alone totally transforms most men's lives and totally transformed mine.
Yeah, I think that that 1950s story that your entire community can be your spouse and your kids has done so much damage to the masculine ideal. The first one to turn me onto that was Sebastian Junger's Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging, that book.
Yeah.
And just talking about how impactful it is that hierarchy matters, and you need different types of leadership and different types of skills during different types of things. And no one person, there's not a single person that is going to be able to step into all of those roles and hold it together. And so I love that you speak to that. And it's been consistent. Kevin Peterson came on and talked about it with 12-step. Therese came on and talked about it just in couples, right? Like whose lane is who's leading now. It's so powerful to the piece of that as a man, because it allows you to own your lane because you know how to follow. So you know how to lead a little bit. And then when it's not your lane, you're like, hey man, hands off the wheel. What are we doing? What am I carrying? It's fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's been one of the joys for me and it keeps me in some sense connected. If I'm always on my edge learning something new from someone or a different group, it reminds me what a lot of the guys coming to me are experiencing. Like it can be scary. You don't know, you feel stupid a lot. And that's just a normal part of the experience. And welcoming men into that is actually one of the fun things of like, hey, no, you don't have to do it perfect. It's okay to not know the answers. Like we're doing a very different culture in this world and this work that you can step into.
Well, it just leaves so much more room for mentorship, right? Like so many young guys I work with, there's this expectation that by 20, you're supposed to be really good at something.
Yeah.
I was trash at everything at 20.
Totally.
Right? That's how I got good at some things, was by being willing to go be trash and being willing to be led. Yes. And that, I think it goes back to that story, right? When you're in that fragile masculinity of having to be perfect, you fail to learn. You can't, because you can't let anybody in to critique you.
Exactly. Yeah. Feedback is such an important part of how we grow, and a healthy ecosystem for that is part of what a great group or mentorship of any kind, right, really can provide. And that's an important life stage, I think, for a lot of men that has kind of been eradicated, even in terms of just mentorship, right? Like the fact that, I don't have to know it all. I can go study under someone who's going to guide me through a process. I mean, now it's like Wild West launched into the world, be an entrepreneur, be an influencer, like you're doing everything by yourself oftentimes. And that's what's such a great relief I get when I found those mentors for me, and then as I increasingly become one for other people, of like, okay, great. Like I want to learn and I don't know how to do it. So help me mess up and learn from it. That's kind of it. I used to say that how I kind of put the healthy father energy, whether it's our biological father or not, is just a loving presence that's, well, let's figure it out together. Yeah. Whatever the problem is, you messed up, you fell down, you blew, okay, well, let's figure it out. Okay, what happened? What can we do different? What did you learn from it? And just that loving presence.
Well, it goes back to that Swiss cheese idea. Like Eric Blamo, who's a really great trauma therapist and couples therapist, came on and talked about how, that father safety energy in the world is so important to have in multiple places, and how healing that can be for folks. And so yes. I think we're really lucky to have you doing the work you do with groups and bringing that wisdom forward for guys. So I think this is just another opportunity to thank you for what you do. And thanks for bringing it in.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You as well.
Well, sure. I do it one at a time, but we're getting there. I like the pivot of this. So we just asked you of like your big wisdom nuggets from all these years of doing all of this. And now sure. I like this idea of bringing you back to like when you knew very little, right? What's a truth about masculinity that you learned before you were 12 that remains true today?
Yeah, honestly, the first one that came to mind was a positive one, and it was, it's okay to get excited about things. Nice. Like just to have the things you love for no other reason than you love it. In a lot of my work, I see this unfortunately happen to young boys, and I had enough of it stoked. So that was one of, I didn't get a lot of threads from Healthy Masculine, but it was one I got from my dad, which was recognizing certain things I was passionate about, and then allowing for that and supporting that in a sense. Because where I see so much pain for men is, I call it the boyful flame. There's this like joyful curiosity. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in any kid, but particularly in boys, and just story after story after story of the time dad came in. Why do you ask so many questions? Can you just sit down? Mm-hmm. And like, boom, that's it. It's snuffed. Like it goes out. And this idea that it's worth me pursuing things I like just for the sake of, I don't know, my curiosity and awe and passion. That was a gift I was given as a young man that I'm so grateful for. And that it's actually one of my great joys now to get other men reignited of like, you like that thing? That's great.
Tell me all about it.
Go do it. Talk about it. Get obsessed with it, right? Passion is attractive, for one thing. Like to be super into something. My wife, my favorite band's Pearl Jam. She doesn't give a shit about Pearl Jam. She comes because of what happens to me. She likes seeing the experience.
She won't go just for Eddie Vedder. What is wrong with her?
Yeah, no, but she likes seeing me come alive, right? She sees how passionate about, and to her, that's so meaningful to see that fire inside of me that doesn't come out everywhere, right? So joyful and innocent. And I think we really need that as men. And that's one place where a lot of guys let the flame, either from that trauma or they get married, they have kids, they have jobs. They let all that go. And then they wonder why they just feel so dead inside.
Well, and I think it's that layered culture of stoic expression that's expected, right?
Totally.
Particularly in white culture, because we came from like German and British roots.
Yeah.
Right. And that is those are stoic cultures, right? Hold it together.
Very. And
I think when we stepped into American culture and it became white culture, we lost the things that make that possible.
Yeah.
And so it just became like a killjoy instead of a like bearing. Yeah. So I'm so glad that your dad gave you that, because you're right. So many guys I talk to, they get uncomfortable when they get joyous. They get uncomfortable when they get passionate. A friend of mine posted this, and I can't remember. I don't remember if it was her idea, but it made me laugh because it's one of the truest things I've ever heard in my life. She was like, anytime a guy starts mansplaining to me, I just look at him like a 5-year-old being really excited to tell me about my Hot Wheel cars, and it changes the entire experience.
That's so great. That's so generous too. Right? That is a generous woman.
And I immediately responded with like, I'm so glad to hear that, because I swear to God, half the time, if it's a social situation, that's exactly what's happening if it happens to me.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Like not at work, right? Not in professional settings when there's expertise, but like when somebody's just excited and spouting off at you, sometimes that's just like the little excited boy in them.
So true.
The next question that we've asked everybody is, tell us a time when pursuing your manhood hurt you.
when I first decided to pivot into this professionally. So I had been a filmmaker. I was doing some web development on the side. I had some steady clients, and then I kind of got the bug. And, part of one of the shadows of men's work was okay, I'm going to go all in. I'm going to burn all the bridges. I'm going to become a men's work leader and coach. And so I let go of all my steady work. And I was like, I'm going in. And I quickly racked up like 45 grand in debt and could barely pay rent and was so stressed out. And it really freaked out my wife. She was before we had kids, and she's like, how am I going to do this? And it was such a painful year. And my stress response is to withdraw. So I'm like stressed about money and feeling shame that I can't make a living, and she's noticing it. And then we're growing more distance. And, I was well versed in men's work, and here I was doing the very thing of like disconnecting and trying to be super tough and show the thing. And then, partly through my groups and some conversations with her, it became really clear, and now this is actually one of the things I champion for men that they don't necessarily always want to hear is sometimes you got to do both. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you got to do your deepest passion, your purpose, the thing you love, and
pay your bills.
Have to have a job that pays the bills to bridge that gap. Maybe one time they'll merge, but oftentimes you have to do both. And I kind of had to learn a lesson in some sense of the danger of kind of the Joseph Campbell follow your bliss thing. My generation was particularly sold from a young age of you just do what you love and the money will follow. And it wasn't quite that simple for me. So, I learned a painful lesson.
Anybody. That myth is so, you're absolutely right. Our generation of guys were raised with it, and it is a myth. I like how Scott Galloway puts it of people keep trying to turn hobbies into jobs. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes you can, you and I are lucky. We've found a way to bring our passion into our work, and that's wonderful. But so many guys I work with, their happiness comes from having a provider job.
Yeah.
And their passion, and that they've found a way to be in the provider job that leaves room for their passion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people need to stop negating that as not a valid way to be.
And it creates so much more space for us as men, I have found, because there is so much pressure, particularly in men's work around, you got to do it this way. And if how you're making money isn't aligned to your deepest purpose, there's all these problems. And it turns out your deepest purpose may have nothing to do with how you make money. And that's a big mindset shift. It's that might be the fuel that allows you to burn this fire, to do the thing, to do the service work, to create the art, to whatever. And, it was a hard journey I had to make. And now, I see a lot of men really caught in that painful trap. And it creates a lot of challenge for particularly young people where they're like, oh, this is my deepest purpose. It doesn't feel meaningful, so I'm not going to do it. And then they don't accumulate skills and form any kind of mastery, which then makes you less viable in the workplace. And then, all kinds of stuff gets, tied into that around our masculinity, right or wrong. And so just adding complexity to that conversation and experiencing it on my own of then having to go back and get some stable work and build my business simultaneously was a hard lesson I had to learn. That was quite painful for my wife, for me, for my bank account. It took me years to, get back to zero. And now I'm pretty passionate around, yes, you just might have to do both.
I would say you should do both in most cases.
Yeah.
It's not even you might have to. I think most people should. I do a lot of business coaching for private practice and folks coming out of the community health world. And they're all scared to. And I'm like, well, you don't do it all at once. You start a Saturday practice, and then maybe you go to 410s at work and then do your practice until you're ready, until you've got enough of a foothold that you can pay your bills. I think I always like coming out on the high note, right?
Sure.
Tell us about a time when pursuing your manhood empowered you.
I'm just going to share a particular moment. I was leading a retreat a couple years ago and led a really deep practice. I had been on a bunch of podcasts that I do with a friend of mine. And this guy had come because I had shared my story about my family and being German stoic, kind of locked up, no sense of interiority, numb, really uncomfortable, totally terrified of talking to women, just frozen, like a boy frozen in my body for decades. And we did this deep practice, and he came up at the end of the session, and he's like, "Can we talk?" And I could tell his heart was ready to burst. And we just went to the side of this little yurt we were working on and sat down, and he just kind of like opened. He just fully opened to how hard it had been and how lonely he had been and how stuck inside himself he had been. And he was just crying and in tears, and there was just so much similarity between our family systems. I just got it. I was like, yeah, man, I totally get it. And he's like, I know you get it. That's why I'm here. And, you know, there was just that moment of sharing that and feeling what a outrageously courageous act it was in terms of going against all the karma of his family system to approach me like that, the leader of the training and all this stuff, and to just ask for some attention and help. To me, that was like, okay, whatever's happening here, I'm on track. Like, this is what I want to be happening in the world, because that's what I, you know, was dying for in my life. And so I'm so grateful to, whenever I can, be a version of that to the men who it lines up with. And, you know, he's gone on to do some of my programs, and just incredible guy, totally transformed his life.
Well, and it goes back to that mentorship, right? I think men need mentorship because our roles are so ill-defined that if you don't see somebody where you want to be, that you can relate to where they've been, it's really hard to believe you can get there.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. And that was probably another, just weaving all this together. Big learning for me was, for a long time, even early as a coach in the men's workspace, I would get really hard on myself and comparing myself to other coaches and what they could do. And they had these corporate jobs and made a lot of money, and then, you know, had all these relationships, but it felt hollow. So they had to go inside. And I was like, you know, that was never my experience. I was like a late blooming virgin, had a hard time, didn't make a lot of money, you know, had passions. And anyway, that's the more I just share that now. Hey, here's where I was, and it was brutal. Here's what got me to where I am. It's better. That's what attracts the right guys. And so men's group, what I love about that, what I teach men is, again, the service component is when you start to share your inner world and your pain, and you be vulnerable, and you are courageous to go to those places or bring those things forward in your life you don't want to look at or never had the tools for, you're not just doing it for yourself. The second you do that, you are creating a field of permission that allows other men to step in, and they get inspired by it. I see it every time I do these deep groups. You know, man, when I saw so-and-so, just when I saw how vulnerable and real you were about what happened with your wife, that's what gave me the belief in myself that I could do this right now. And here I go. And it unlocks something in me, or something with my dad. And so it's just, you know, the real beauty to growing in community, like we've been talking about, that our work is someone else's work, and someone else's work is often the key to our work. And as a leader, I get to experience that too. You know, I talk to my guys, like when we're sitting together, you know, I'm sure you see this with your clients too. In a way, we're both getting something out of it. It's for mutual freedom. I become more free every time I work with a guy, because I learned something about myself as a leader, as a man, as a coach, you know. So it's one of the great joys of, you know, being in this world.
Well, and being connected by the masculinity to the masculinity, it lets you see so much more of yourself in the world. So with all of that, right, you've shared all these wonderful experiences with the groups you've ran and your education content. Where should people look for you? Like, if they wanted to hear more from you, if they wanted some of your guidance on how to do these things, where would they find you?
Yeah, best way to keep up with me is at my website, which is evolutionary.men. So not .com, but evolutionary.men. And you can read my writings, see my programs, listen to my podcast. All my appearances like this will be on there. So, you know, if you're getting a hit and you're like, yeah, I want a little bit more of that, there's tons of that there. I do have trainings on, you know, shadow work and men's groups. And for men's groups in particular, what I'll say is you don't have to work with me. Like, I'm pretty well networked at this point. So if you're like, yeah, I want to find a group, I don't know where to start, certainly I have things I can offer you, but I'm quite passionate about helping men find stuff in their local area. So even if you just hit the contact button, you're like, hey man, I'm in Atlanta, what's around? I can point you to some stuff. And my network of other men doing this is growing, meeting guys like you as well, day by day. So just reach out. Like, you do not have to do this stuff alone. There's never been a better moment to find a group than right now. Like, there is a swell happening, and it's needed and necessary. And you just got to take that first step and reach out to someone.
Yeah, I have that happen so often just locally. My network doesn't expand past Colorado very well, but I always encourage everybody I know, like, no, like, if somebody's looking for a therapist, give them my number. And it's not because they're going to work with me most of the time. It's because I'm going to help them like find a good therapist, because just like anything else, there's good and there's bad. And
Yep,
it's so much easier
totally.
to navigate when you have an inside source. I'm so glad you're willing to do that for guys. That's a wonderful thing to offer.
Yeah, 100%. My joy.
Well, man, thanks so much for coming on. I think we're going to help a lot of guys start some things.
Yeah, my pleasure. And thanks so much for creating the space. It's so needed.
And that's our conversation with Jason. I'm so happy to have met him, and I'm so glad that he's in this space doing the work he does. I think he's really helping a lot of men out, and I hope his insights helped you. As we talk about in every episode, we take a look at what information we're giving you and make sure it's as correct as we can. In this episode, we only found a small thing to correct. Jason talked a little bit about hormones and the differences between men and women. The hormones he was citing, all that research is currently on mammals. There's not a lot of information about humans yet. While that's really insightful and probably going to impact us, it's important for you to know that that's still emerging science. Now let's bring it back to you. I asked you at the beginning of the episode to think about the kinds of men you would want to see in your men's group. Now that you've thought about that, I want you to reflect on who you want to be in your men's group. What kind of man do you want to be as you show up to that? Do me a favor and either leave me a comment, send me a message, or fill out the survey letting me know whether you're going to start or join. And if it's a comment, tell me a little bit about what you're looking for there. Let's help normalize this for guys. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so glad that you're here and starting these conversations in your world and hopefully taking actionable steps. Remember, as Mark Manson says, a smart man's procrastination is overthinking. Don't be that guy. Take what you learned here, go find somewhere to join, or go build something that's going to be worthwhile for you. I look forward to hearing about your perspective on it. Thank you so much for taking the time to share it. We'll see you next week on episode 16, where we talk to an expert about dyslexia and why so many guys slip through the cracks with it. I'll see you there.